Great. And the broadcast is going. Usually takes a couple seconds to actually go, but probably by now.
All right, so we'll splice in music. Hi, I'm Ben Furman.
And I'm Nate Blyton.
And this is Patch In, the show from SoundNotion.tv dedicated to the wonderful world of electroacoustic music. Let's start with some news. So, if you're like me, your audio interface is probably getting a little old and long in the tooth. I just had to replace headphone jacks on mine. And, it's time to start looking for new stuff. Fortunately, NAMM just happened. And one of the products I am really excited about and would love to get my hands on, especially if they sent me a free one, is the new audio interface from Antelope Audio. It is the Orion 32 HD, and it's an even more supercharged version of their Orion line. But, and this is the cool part, it is compatible with Pro Tools HD via the HDX ports on the Pro Tools Excel cards. So you can use it for Pro Tools HD sessions, or it has USB 3, so you can use it for all of your other DAWs as well. So you can run it in Logic, you can run it in Pro Tools HD, you can run it in Reaper, whatever. 32 analog ins and outs. I want one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on top of that, supposedly you can run all of that with only 2 samples of latency.
Yeah. Super fancy. It's got a bunch of effects that comes with, and yeah, it looks like just super high level audio interface, especially if you're a Pro Tools HD user.
Yeah. And it even fits their black and purple color scheme.
Perfect. So sticking with hardware land, Behringer's DeepMind synth is now shipping. We mentioned it a couple shows ago, just because it was like the super fancy thing that was bouncing around on the internet. But now it's out; you can actually get it. We'll have a link to the Sweetwater kind of write up on it. It looks super fun. There's some audio examples. It's a 12-voice analog polysynth with tons of parameters, two LFOs for voice, and it comes in at just under $1,000. Supposedly a rack mount version is in the works, but we'll probably hear more about that later. But yeah, I'm particularly interested in this synthesizer. Doesn't have any audio inputs, but it's got everything else you would want in a 12-voice synth.
Yeah, and I keep hearing the rumors about the rack mounts, and I really would want that one more than the standard 49 key version myself, just because I don't have space for another keyboard.
Yeah,
so
and this one in particular, I think is supposed to like connecting it to computer and using a software interface for programming. It's supposed to be really flexible and really good. Although it also does have all the knobs and everything too.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, and that's half the fun.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you don't like having tons of knobs and you want to go with a soft synth, there is the new product from UVI, the World Suite. This is an upgrade, and I guess it would be a replacement to their World's Traditions library, where you have multi-sampled instruments from a variety of regions and types of instruments. They have insane amounts of control, and it comes absolutely alive in their Falcon synth, which for those of you who used Mach 3, this is the same engine that powered Mach 3. And it is criminally underused. It's hands down the most powerful synth I've ever used in the software land. And no one knows about it. So buy it.
I know.
Yeah. So this is just a great multi-sample library. Everything was recorded at 88.2, and it upsamples surprisingly well in the tests I've done with it. You have some very good multi-sampled things, especially for instruments like the oud, the santur. There's a very nice set of shakuhachis as well. And then, you start running those through GRM tools. You get some really cool sounds. The only catch is that it is a 30 gigabyte download. So that did take a while, but it is totally worth it. Unfortunately, my MacBook's hard drive is now crying for the sweet release of death, or at least an upgrade.
And if that's the main downside is that it's got so many sounds, so much audio, that's not the worst thing in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, But speaking of cool sounds, our guest today is a grad student at University of Virginia and a huge fan and master of noise music in both the traditional pre-composed and improv sense. So welcome to Maxed Fern.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
So great to have you on the show. You have sent us some really interesting pieces to talk about. But before we get into those, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your current projects that you're working on, both sort of the live stuff and the studio stuff?
Yeah, so a lot of my focus is live right now.
Mhm.
I used to do a lot of fixed media work, and I realized how much I love live music and improvised music and mixing analog and digital technologies together. So the live stuff I'm doing right now combines Axolotl, which is a hardware kind of external sound device,
Mhm.
with a matrix mixer sending to different guitar pedal chains,
Mm.
and then a super collider.
Nice.
So then there's about 56 channels if you start parsing out the matrix mixer stuff. So there's just a lot of control, and it's a very finicky system, so it's very unpredictable, which is also very nice in live settings.
Cool.
And then recently I added 3 synths from Teenage Engineering.
Mm.
The OP series or the
The newer OP ones.
Okay. Yeah, they just came out with a new one that we didn't mention earlier, but yes, the OP Pocket Tonic, I believe is what it's called.
Yeah, I'm using the arcade, the office one, the yellow, red, and purple ones,
Yeah.
but and just overclocking them, so their rhythms
Okay.
turned into timbre.
Cool.
That is nice. Are you just jumping them to overclock them, or are you rearranging the circuit itself or other things?
I have the tempo knob turned all the way up,
Okay.
and then I'm swinging it.
Okay.
So there's a swing setting, and swing is at max and tempo is at max, and then every single button of the step sequencer is pushed. So it's just everything is turned on fully,
Cool.
and it turns into a sound instead of a sequence.
Nice.
Okay.
That sounds great. So I haven't gotten to use one of these pocket operators myself, and I was just reading and watching some videos about them. The data transfer, like holding it up to a speaker and it talk computer into the mic and in the pocket operator, and then it transfers data that way. That's like magic. It's amazing.
Yeah. They also sync with a metronome, which is weird. So if you don't do it right, you get this metronome pulse in your sound.
Fun. Sweet.
Which could be interesting if you're able to use any type of metronome and you're just sending out a click from Super Collider and then
You can do it. It just
weird
has to
things
be
with it.
you can actually do that. It just has to be this super loud pop sound, pretty much.
Okay, so just use dust.ar as your impulse.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Crank
Fun.
volume on it.
Sweet. So you said you use a bunch of guitar pedals and stuff too.
Yeah.
Which in classical music world, it's a relatively recent addition.
Yes. What is a guitar pedal?
Yeah.
I don't understand this concept.
Yeah.
Do you play guitar, or did you get into having guitar pedals as part of your rig just through the synthesizer land kind of stuff?
Playing guitar, I kind of just hit the guitar and see what happens. It's not really playing.
Cool.
I play percussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I've always liked guitar pedals. So I kind of had a collection of them from like high school.
Nice.
When I had no money, I bought like all the Dan Electro pedals.
Yeah. Those are easy to
So-
rack up. Yeah.
Exactly. So I got a bunch of those, and then just kind of thrift store shopped other pedals for a while to get like delta distortion and A/B switchers and stuff like that.
Yeah. Handy
And then-
utility ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I started finding guitar pedals on Etsy.
Oh, okay.
So I just got one like a month ago from England. That it does stuff. That's all I can really describe it as.
Yeah.
It's like the size of like a shoebox,
Fun.
Okay.
and none of the knobs are labeled. None of the there's three stomp switches on it, and it's flip, crunch, and on. So nothing really means anything.
So
That's
this reminds me a
delightful.
lot of like the old throbbing gristle gristleator pedals that they would make and occasionally sell,
Nice.
where they're just totally black boxes with no labels whatsoever other than in and out.
Yeah.
And it's just total happenstance as to what they would do.
Yeah. So, and I'm these mystery boxes are pretty awesome. In what you sent us, you said that you work with some custom synths as well. What do you
Yeah.
mean?
One of the guys who works at UVA here, he builds little synthesizers, little like
Cool.
4-channel oscillators and stuff like that.
Sweet.
So I've been using some of his stuff. He goes by the voice of Saturn, and you can get his stuff like Synthrotech. It's really cheap stuff.
Cool.
But it sounds great. It ring modulates. It's got 2 different LFOs and resonance and things like that. And it runs on a 9-volt battery.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, that works.
So yeah, really cool stuff. And he gives you CV options, so you can grab like an interface coming from Super Collider with some CV stuff and pop it in there and see what happens.
Cool.
There's a lot of expandability with it.
Nice. That sounds great. Yeah. We've mentioned, and so you mentioned at the beginning the Axolotl kind of system, and how that's part of your rig as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
I haven't gotten to use one of those. Ben, have you?
No, every time I think I'm going to have time to finally buy one and then sit down and play with it, something comes along and I get commissioned to write an acoustic piece or something.
Yeah,
similar.
right. Yeah, but what's it like working with that system?
It's interesting. If you're used to Max MSP, there's similarities,
Cool.
Yep.
but there's also a lot of stuff missing.
Mhm.
So then you jump into that world of, if you know how to program, you can make it on your own.
Yeah.
And then if you don't, you have to find someone in the forums that's already made it and ask if you can have it.
Yeah.
What's nice about the environment, though, is you can actually edit the code of the objects in the environment.
Okay.
Good.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's really easy if you don't like his distortion or something to just go in and make it your own and save it separately.
Yeah.
Cool. Nice.
Just tweak a couple of parameters here and there, and
Yeah.
That's
very
great
nice.
to hear. It sounds really flexible. Yeah.
Yeah. My first one caught fire.
Okay. Was that an intentional tweaking of the code and overclocking it, or did you just forget to ventilate it, or what happened there?
I don't know what happened. I was actually working with the guy who developed it to figure out what happened, because it just started smoking during one performance. So
In a performance, no less. That's awesome.
it was
I
like
hope everybody.
yeah, it was during the sound check. But since
Okay.
then,
Oh,
that was months ago. Since then, I've had no problems with the new one. So I think it was just one of those freak accidents.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
But super fun, super great sounds.
Great.
yeah.
Excellent.
But speaking of the Axolotl, is that one of the devices that you're using on the piece? Through Noise Comes Being.
Yeah, so that piece is my live setup, which is the Axolotl Super Collider, the Voice of Saturn synthesizer, and that's running all through a matrix mixer and guitar pedals back into itself. So there's a lot of feedback chains going on.
So yeah, that was kind of a really, really cool setup. So you're getting like a lot of noise and granulation going through there, but it still has this really kind of meditative feel to it due to the rate of change that you're using in there. Can you describe a little bit about the process that you're using in it?
Well, it's completely improvised.
Okay.
And,
Well, the process that you used at the time
Well,
with that setup.
this is the title kind of reflects my setup.
Mhm.
So I'll have like multiple untitles called like there's a few different ones right now, a few different setups with titles. And the idea that I go into is exploring the setup, and the only thing that I start with is am I going to start with high frequency sounds or low frequency sounds?
Okay.
And then am I going to end abruptly, or am I going to just kind of fade out into nothing? And then everything that happens between the beginning and the end is just a moment by moment listening to what's going on and adjusting accordingly.
Mhm.
So very moment time oriented.
Okay.
Nice. So how did you arrive at, like you said, this is using your current live rig?
Yeah.
And listening to this recording that you've got on SoundCloud that we'll have a link to in the show notes, you get a real variety of different timbres, and the progression is really nice and slow and meditative kind of for long periods of time and stuff. Did you find that like what was the process of arriving at that setup, and did the piece, or like did that improvisation is that strongly affected by the gear that you have, or when you had different gear, were you coming up with different kinds of things?
The rate of change and the sounds is very dependent on the gear.
Yeah.
And I got to this setup pretty much just by buying more equipment and not wanting to remove anything from my setup.
Cool.
It's a frequent problem that people have. Yes.
Yeah. So like my first setup was like the Axolotl and Super Collider.
Yeah.
And then it went Axolotl, Super Collider, and Distortion. And it's just, there's like multiple iterations to just keep building. And this is the current one that just has like everything I own in it. And it's impossible to, it uses 2 9-channel MIDI controllers. They each have like 3 knobs. So there's too much to change quickly.
Yeah.
So going into it, and it's noise and it's loud, so you can't really change stuff fast in feedback chains without potentially blowing up the system.
Yeah. Or just like inadvertently dropping all the sound or something like that. Yeah,
exactly. So I think the progression, even though it's improvised, I don't think I really can speed it up without having problems with the audio.
Interesting. Well, cool.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate to that in terms of just having so much to deal with when you're doing it live. Yeah, there would be absolutely no way you could easily just take something out without affecting everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then you said you're doing that with a 56-channel matrix mixer?
No, so it's a 4-channel matrix mixer.
Okay.
But when you parse out the channels coming from Super Collider with the MIDI controller, the channels coming from the Axolotl with the MIDI controller, the 4 channels from the synth and everything, and then there's like 3 outputs from the matrix mixer going into guitar chains.
Yeah.
If you count the individual channel sounds that you can possibly have, it's somewhere around like 56.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of paths of audio going around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So is the majority of what you're doing then just changing settings on the mixer? And
no, I don't even really touch the mixer most of the time. It's turning off and on guitar pedals, and then with the MIDI controllers, each synth definition that I'm using has 3 controls plus a volume slider.
Okay.
And then from the Axolotl, there's 9 channels that each have 3 controls for different aliasing or filtering, things like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. So for this piece, the recording that you've got posted is a live recording. Did you do more than one run with it and select this one, or was this just kind of a one-off, one-take wonder piece?
No, I did a few.
Okay.
Probably did about 10.
Nice.
Yeah. And I picked the one that didn't get too loud and didn't screech, which I like doing live in like an actual live setting, but not for recorded material that I have to send to people.
Sure, yeah.
So this one was a nice balance between granulation, distortion, change without blow your ears off feedback.
That's
Nice.
interesting. So you're more comfortable blowing up people's heads in person than over the internet.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Well, I mean, it is a certain, it does require a certain personal touch when you're blowing someone's head
Right.
out,
They
obviously.
You also get feedback. Like to me, I can handle
yeah.
a lot of like sound without me wanting to take my headphones off.
Yeah.
But listening on headphones, everyone's going to be different. So I try to stay conscious to that. But then in live settings, I can tell when people are uncomfortable.
Yeah, you can read the crowd
Right,
and
you
stuff.
can read-
Yeah, cool. Interesting. Yeah. Well, there's another live recording that you sent us. This other Invisible Signals. You've got a video of a performance of it on Vimeo.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty wild thing and a little bit of a different rig. There's an electromagnetic microphone as
Yeah.
a thing.
Right, which
So-
I have questions. Where did you get one of those? And where can I get one of those?
Yeah, so they're super cool. It's
Yeah.
it's called the Electro Slush 3, I think. It's
Love that name.
yeah, it's from I think Bulgaria or some Eastern European country. I can send you guys the link after the show.
Sounds great.
And pretty much it just has 2 electromagnetic sensors and a gain control. And when you go up to not microphones, electronics, it picks up the electromagnetic radiation coming from them.
Interesting.
Okay. But if you turn the gain all the way up, does it start picking up electromagnetic signals coming out of the human body, or just random radio waves, or if you put it too close to a cable?
Oh, if you put it too close to something, it hurts. If the gain's up too much.
Yeah.
I've been very cautious because, like, in the studio, or like I have my home studio, I can't really turn it on and turn the gain up.
Yeah.
There's just too much stuff. It hurts.
Interesting.
Right. Instant Larson tones, or
All sorts of different sounds. So it's hard to describe. Like, every light switch in my house makes a different sound. So
okay.
yeah. So light switches are really cool. My cell phone makes like melodies when I'm like playing games on it. Yeah, it's super weird.
Nice.
So then
yeah.
yeah. So for that piece, it uses an electromagnetic microphone and it goes into Maxim SP.
Yeah, cool.
And I'm using the FTM library to analyze frequencies in the sound, the peak frequencies, and giving it to the performers in real time.
Yeah.
So just projecting everything onto an N slider, or
No, I'm using the Bach library to actually notate everything.
Sweet.
Nice.
So then I can have, I think it's 16 peak frequencies, but each performance changed a little bit based on instrumentation.
Yep.
And it notates them on a scale. And then the instructions to the performers are match the timbre that you hear coming from the electronics.
Oh,
okay.
cool.
Yeah, I was wondering about the relationship between the instrumentation and what it was picking up, but yeah, that explains quite a bit of it right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's an electronics guy that had like car key, like locker things. Two computers, a power strip, and a few other little like electronic toys that he was switching between with the microphone
Yeah.
to change the timbre.
Cool. I think we see him on the left in that video, and it seems like he's kind of slowly moving the microphone between a bunch of different devices.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Nice. How did you get connected with an electromagnetic microphone? I haven't run across one of those in the studio before.
Yeah, so the guy who actually makes the synth that I use in my live setup, Travis, he found it and ordered it. And I was just kind of chilling in his office one day, and he's like, "Hey, look what I got."
Nice.
And I was like, "Cool, I want one." So I ordered one, and 2 months later it came.
Nice. Cool. Do you have plans to do more pieces with that kind of thing? I guess there's two big things: electromagnetic input, and then converting the frequency spectrum and stuff into notation for improvisation.
Yeah. I've really been into like live notation of spectrums.
Cool.
Okay.
So the next piece, I want to still use the electromagnetic microphone, but instead of giving the performers a scale, actually generating rhythm and pitch for them to read in real time, and then capturing them through a microphone.
Okay.
So it can reanalyze what they played with the addition of the electromagnetic waves, and then re-notating it. So it's this recursive process.
Yeah.
Wow.
Notation feedback thing happening.
Yeah.
So almost like I am sitting in a room only with notation.
And a variable that's going to be the electromagnetic waves.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Nice.
I am writing in a room. I am composing.
Yeah. Right. I am notating.
I think this is the only podcast out there that makes jokes about Alvin Lucier. So.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that'd be a funny joke book for sure. Uh,
A
so
little repetitive though, but yeah,
perhaps, yeah,
better than the minimalist joke book.
Oh,
yeah.
Why? Why did the chicken? You see where I'm going with this, all right?
Yeah. Exactly. We digress perhaps a little bit. This is one of those cases though where I wish we had some live effects on our microphones to just do a little improvisation. We should introduce that in future
Yeah.
months. Yeah. Well, so there's another piece of yours that you shared with us that involves other relationships between kind of images notation and audio and stuff. This other one, establish, corrupt, broken. I understand you achieved sound generation using images in Super Collider. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on with that?
Yeah. So this is pretty much my whole dissertation is turning
cool.
images into sound.
Nice.
In some way. So it started off as reading images as sonograms.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then spectrally analyzing it, and it turned into reading images as buffer numbers, and then interpolating buffers with the pixel values scaled down.
Sorry, just scanning from pixel to pixel, top right to or top left to bottom right.
Yeah, top left to bottom right.
Okay.
And then what's really neat about that is it gives you a 32-bit float number. That's just this really long number. That's the ARGB values. That's just way out of the buffer's range. So you can choose to scale that down, or you can just put a lot of limiters on it, and each one really changes the way the sound, the timbre reacts in the system. And then on top of that, you can manipulate photos in Super Collider as well.
Okay.
So you can get the pixels, manipulate them algorithmically, and then turn it into a sound that is different from the original image that you used.
Yeah. Interesting. So we've talked about working with data and sonifying or doing different kinds of sonification and stuff, and working with this that different strategies for that. Of like, but it sounds like you're basically heavily distorting the numbers that are coming in by having a limiter do a hard cap like that.
Yeah, that way is really fun, but stuff starts to sound the same in the long run.
Sure.
So I started to just in the code get the maximum and minimum values of the pixels.
Okay.
And then just scaling everything to a -1 and 1, and that gives a lot more variety in the sound.
Okay.
Cool. Great. Well, you arrived at some really, really nice sounds too. You doing that.
Well, and then the question,
that's a lot of editing, actually.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So the question then becomes, are certain image sources better for sound generation than others?
It really depends what you're going for.
Okay.
Low resolution kind of has a nice analog distortion kind of sound, or like bit crushing sound.
Yeah.
Really high quality images just take forever to unfold because there's so many values.
Right.
So like a 4K image ends up being like 7 minutes or something of audio, or it's so there is like a happy medium, or you can analyze it and find a part that actually sounds like what you're going for, and then just kind of take it. So it's really just a way to generate large quantities of sound.
Cool. Yeah. So actually, and that's one of the things I was wondering. This piece, Establish, Corrupt, Broken, that we hear, is that just one image kind of read, or was there a lot of editing and stuff?
There's about 15 images.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
And the beginning of the piece just starts off with layering the whole image sound, like as a whole on top of itself, and mixing through 8 channels, and kind of trying not to get them to clash in terms of like frequency range. When it gets into that really intense part of the piece, it's each sample is being chopped up into little like 10 millisecond slivers, and then manually put back together. So almost like like granular tape splicing.
Good Lord.
And and I was told I should write an algorithm to do it, but I really like doing it by hand.
Nice.
And you're just assembling that in Logic or Pro Tools or
Logic, it's really fast to do it in Logic.
yeah.
Because then each little like 10, 20 millisecond clip has its own envelope.
Yep.
So Logic copies envelopes if you hit copy and paste. So
Yeah. Handy.
saves a lot of, yeah. And then when I'm manually positioning sounds, like you can have them right on top of each other, or you can have little samples of space between them. So there's a lot of inconsistency
Okay.
to produce these glitchy timbres that unfold.
Nice. Well, that's it. It's fun hearing like that you prefer doing it by hand for this inherently digital thing. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I've had to do that by hand a couple of times myself. And
Yeah.
oh, the tedium.
Oh yeah, it took me like 4 months to just do like 3 minutes of sound.
Yeah.
Nice. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. It's like stop motion animation, only way, way worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the pieces that we've talked about, there's this 3 month to 3 minutes of audio ratio, and then there's the stuff that you do live with kind of a similar kind of sound and set of gear and stuff like that. Do you have a preference working in one way or another, or is it?
I like the live stuff because I like performing.
Yeah.
But the fixed media, having 8 channels and like a subwoofer and really being able to sculpt the sound and have it interact across a room is also really interesting that you can't do live.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So it's really tough. I like them both at the same time in different respects, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned that you're a percussionist, or you play percussion
Yeah.
and stuff. Is that in the classical sense of like doing marimba and timpani and things like that?
Yep.
What was the relationship between your percussion education and your approach to electronic music, I guess?
Yeah. When I was studying percussion, I never really liked the percussion repertoire that everyone else around me was playing.
Okay.
So I kind of explored alternative percussion repertoire, a lot of it coming from like Japan and China and Korea.
Okay.
And finding there are certain pieces by like Stockhausen that after he wrote them, he transcribed them for percussion. So really, yeah. Comet from his Friday opera was originally for synthesizer with 17 timbres, I think it was. And then a percussionist approached him and said, "Hey, I want to play this piece for percussion." And he kind of made a version to play. So I really explored new music with percussion that wasn't melodic really at all. That used these abstract notational schemes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That a lot of times involved spatialization because the multi-percussion setups were so big.
Oh, sure.
So that percussion kind of got me interested in alternative ways of doing things.
Yeah. It's interesting. I haven't really thought about percussion being such a spatialized thing too, because the thing that makes that sound is over there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, it's cool. And I imagine there's just timbrally, the percussion world has a lot of more kind of noise and different things that I can totally hear a relationship between the soundscapes that you've made in these pieces that you shared with us too. But, yeah. I think one of my favorite sounds just in life was the sound design that they did for the movie Thor, the first one. The Destroyer character is the big metal guy with the fire coming out of his face. It's just this thing. I mean, I think you achieve some of the similar kind of greatness in Established Corrupt Broken.
Thank you.
It's one of my favorite kind of timbres. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, and now we've gone to comic books. So.
Yeah, exactly. We've got to touch on Marvel Universe at least some point.
I thought that was only if Batsner was on here, but okay, fine.
No, but that's great.
Oh dear.
So you mentioned that
Right.
this working with images is your dissertation topic and stuff.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about the kind of pieces you're working on generally. Is there any other projects you're working on, or is that kind of
Yeah.
focusing all your attention?
No, I'm actually trying to work on stuff that's not related to my dissertation right now.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm kind of tired of that stuff.
sure. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, right now, I'm trying to train neural networks to identify snare drum sounds.
Okay.
Go on.
Yes.
So I'm using all these artificial sounds, or like synthesized sounds that don't have a relationship to anything in the natural world. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to train a neural network for a particular type of sound and then see how it makes that sound. So it's a sound that we can relate to that's not actually coming from an actual snare drum or even an algorithm to model a snare drum. It's coming from what the computer thinks a snare drum is supposed to be.
Interesting.
And then I've kind of slowly introduced other sounds that aren't snare drums and said, hey, make me a snare drum sound now. So when you add like a piano sound and then you train the algorithm and say, this piano sound is a snare drum sound, then you start getting these snare drum sounds that have these high partials that kind of ring out from it. and stuff
Interesting.
like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
So what are you using for the neural network?
Super Collider.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it's Nick Collins made a quark for Super Collider neural networks.
Yeah. It has been unfortunately a while since I've had time to delve into Super Collider, but yeah, I'm pretty sure he has something about that on the Super Collider book itself.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I didn't read the whole book.
No one does. I don't think.
Yeah.
I mean, up until like chapter 7, everything is like, hey, here's how to do this really cool thing. Here's how to do this. And then it gets off into like, and then here's all of this theory for the next 500 pages. And like aesthetics of creating P-binds and aesthetics of creating synth def. And
Yeah. Sounds
What
like
the
it. My
number
head is
symbol
gone.
means. Yeah.
yeah,
cool. So neural networks
interesting.
and
Yeah.
image processing and all these things.
Yeah. Super Collider for everything that Super Collider is not meant to do.
Sure. What is Super Collider meant to do? That's a good question, I guess.
define synths
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
repeatedly. and frequently. Oh, dear.
Cool.
But do you have any additional concerts coming up where people can see these happening live?
Yeah. I'll be at Seamus in April
Okay.
with all of my gear in a concert on that Thursday.
Nice.
Yeah. So traveling with about 30 pounds of gear across the
Oh.
country.
Yeah, that's the lovely thing. I mean, as a percussionist, I'm sure you're familiar with moving things and stuff.
But they also supply you with everything when you play percussion.
Fair enough.
And
Yeah.
you just bring your
Okay.
sticks.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'll be performing there, and then I have the Established Corrupt Broken being played at the National Students and Electroacoustic Music event at LSU, which is I think next month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it for now, unless there's live stuff locally in Charlottesville that I haven't booked yet.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, cool. And how can people get updates about things that you're doing? Do you
Yeah, check out my website. It's maxwelltofern.com. And then I have 2 SoundClouds, one for my noise music stuff and one for more of my composer life.
Yeah.
The composer life one is M to Fern. And then my noise music one is under Empathy Box, because that's what I go by when I perform live.
Nice.
If you've read Do Android Dream of Electric Sheep, you'll
I
get the
have.
reference. Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah,
it is
and-
definitely something that could be very helpful nowadays.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I guess we're about at that time of the episode where we move on to this 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 fancy thing, this 2-minute challenge where we challenge each other to talk about something and a complicated thing in 2 minutes or less.
Oh,
And-
is that time already?
Yeah,
Wow.
I think we're pretty close. Yeah. So Ben, I went this past month, and now you're up. What are you going to talk
I
about?
know we're screwed up ever since Dave did one.
I know, yeah.
So even odd numbered. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to completely wing it on bit crushing today.
I believe
I
in
can-
you.
If I can get my timer app on my phone to open up, I don't know why this isn't opening.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs is rolling over in his grave right now. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
You know, first I get rid of the headphone jack, and now the timer won't open.
Nice.
Now they won't make a new Mac Pro. I mean,
Yeah, right. And
oh,
yeah,
not
if
to
you're
editorialize my abusive relationship with Apple, but
yeah, right. Well, if your timer app is having trouble, I've got a PD patch pulled up that'll
No, it's
count out 2
finally,
minutes for us.
it's finally open.
Okay,
So,
cool.
Yep. Hey, let me turn the noise up though. That might actually help.
Yeah.
All right. So here we go. We know that when an audio clip is played back digitally, it's not actually one sample, but thousands of samples per second, depending on whatever your sample rate is, each of which gives the instantaneous amplitude of the clip's waveform. So each of these samples has a corresponding bit depth that governs the overall resolution of each sample. And the higher the number of samples and the higher the bit depth, the better the quality of the audio will be. Nice, pristine, smooth, and boring. So what if we crush it? Specifically, we can use bit crushing effects to take that sterile, nice clip and dirty it up a bit. Bit crushing works by reducing the sample rate and or the bit depth of a clip, making it more reminiscent of old school sound chips like those on the NES or the Commodore 64, or even on your old Speak and Spell from when you were a kid. You insert the plug-in, twiddle the knobs, and you get instantly degraded sound. And it works by reducing the sample rate. Basically, it's downsampling without dithering. And if you do that, you get a harsher sound as samples are dropped and spaced out further and further from each other, resulting in a more angular waveform. And the more you do this, the coarser the waveform becomes, but you do lose your higher frequencies very quickly. If you reduce the bit depth, you get a loss of definition between your loud and your soft areas in the wave. And this makes the resulting waveform more markedly pronounced in jumping between high and low values. So it's more step-like. There are limits, though. At the extreme 1-bit resolution, you basically have a full on and off toggle switch. And at best, it'll be clerks. At worst, it's going to be super loud, blaring Morse code type signals that will blow your speakers. But if you're a little bit more careful, you can also use it to warm up a signal just a little bit, with a hint of digital distortion, getting rid of that analog, DX7 type coldness that makes hipsters get mad. Would you stop?
And who wants angry hipsters?
Yes. I just want a timer app that will stop when I hit stop too. Yes, and now we're going to have letters from both Apple and from the hipster community.
Right. Pitchfork's going to send some angry emails over to yeah.
Yes, well, like I said before, just make a new Mac Pro and everything will be forgiven.
Yeah.
Assuming you send me a fully loaded one.
Cool. Well, I guess there you have it. There's another month of 2-minute challenge. Great job, Ben.
Yeah, well, thank you. So that's that's the quick version of bit crushing. There's some other stuff in terms of like different algorithms for how you do that, and some are better than others. But it's really easy to do. I recommend doing it. You can do it in Max MSP, super easy, and I know Logic and a lot of DAWs have a built-in bit crusher plugin nowadays as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I'm so pleased that the audio effects world has completely embraced bit crushing. Like a lot of synthesizers have like just a knob for that too now and stuff like that.
Yeah. And some of those knobs are really interesting because some of those will only do the sample rate degradation, which gives you more of the classic 8-bit sound as opposed to doing actual bit depth changes. But others will do both. And as you're scaling it up on the knob for degrading it, it's actually downsampling and getting the bit depth reduction at the same time.
Yeah.
And it might be a nice 1-to-1 ratio. It might not be correlated in any sort of way that's evident.
Yeah. I was going to say, I just pulled this out. Those two of you who actually can see the video feed, I don't know if you've ever seen these Alesis Bitterman effects pedals. Alesis used to do these weird stereo keyboard effects pedals back in the late 90s, early 2000s. But this was my only way for having a live bit depth reduction effect.
Huh.
And I just pulled it out of a box a couple days ago, so I've got it next to my desk. But yeah, it's nice that that's just such an accessible thing these days.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, thanks again, Max, for coming on the show. Do you have any last shout outs, plugs, or anything before we go?
No, it's been great. Thank you for having me. It's a really great podcast.
Sweet. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah. And thanks for the wonderful music. So everybody, that's maxwelltfern.com. Thanks, Max, for coming on the show. We'll have links to the pieces that we talked about. You can see a little bit of video of that electromagnetic microphone moving around and get an idea of the notation stuff on the screen.
Yeah.
And then we'll have links to your website and the SoundClouds and everything. But yeah, thanks for joining us. This has been another month of Patch In on the soundnotion.tv/PI. That's where you can find the past episodes and the show notes and stuff like that. You can also subscribe to our show in the iTunes store or however you get your regular podcast feeds. You can support our show by going to soundnotion.tv. There's an Amazon search box that if you get whatever you were going to get on Amazon anyway, through that box, we get a little bit of a kickback. And of course, get the 5 stars in the iTunes store, all those things, the regular way you support podcasts, we sure appreciate. But most of all, thank you for listening. My name's Nate Blyton.
I'm Ben Furman.
And we'll see you next month.